Hey y'all, welcome to Adventures with Aggie, brought to you by the Ryan Martin Foundation. Today we have the first episode of our series collaborating with Dromos Agency featuring Dana Mathewson of Team USA Wheelchair Tennis. Please welcome Dana. Well, Dana, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm excited to meet you. I feel like lots of my guests have spoken about you or told me about you, so I'm glad this is happening now. But
Hopefully good things about
all good
you.
things, great things. Awesome. So just going to the beginning, can you give me a little bit of background on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I first and foremost, I am a Paralympic tennis player for Team USA. I was born and raised in San Diego, California, lived there for most of my formative years. But I was introduced to tennis when I was maybe 13 years old. So the exciting, I guess, story about me is that when I was 10 years old, I contracted a really rare autoimmune disease, and that's like it was called transverse myelitis, and it's a fancy way of saying that my immune system attacked my spinal cord. And it happened all of a sudden. I was at soccer practice. That was my sport of choice. I actually had zero interest in tennis until after my disability, which is kind of weird. But I remember I was running sprints at the end of practice, and we were kind of like cooling down, and my back just went into extreme pain. And I remember that I was confused. You start to go through that checklist in your head, right? Like, have I hit something? Did something hit me? Am I sick? Like, what's going on? And I was troubleshooting, and nothing came to mind as to why this was happening, but it was really bad pain. I've never given birth, but I imagine it was like that, or someone stabbing me. Like, it was horrible. And I remember asking my coach if I could sit out. And he said, like, no, like maybe it's a cramp, because he didn't know either. And so I kept running. And I remember my legs felt weaker and weaker and heavier and heavier. And then the next memory I have, because it was all sort of chaotic, was being driven home with carpool. I was crying in the car, confused and in pain. Then cut to me trying to get into my house. My friend Sarah had to help me up the steps because my legs were getting so weak at that point. And then maybe less than 20 minutes later, I was lying on my living room floor, and my legs just stopped working. I remember I looked down at my big toe trying to move it, and just nothing happened. It was almost like someone had a light switch and they just turned it off. And there was really no answer in terms of why is this happening to me. So of course my 10-year-old brain is freaking out. My parents are luckily doctors, so they rushed me to the hospital. Got into the ER. They did so many MRIs. I feel like I was in like triage and all of that for hours and hours. And they finally found out I got transverse myelitis, and it can affect anyone at any time. It can happen anywhere along your spinal cord. So mine happened at my belly button level, or for all you science people, that's level T10. And I'm incomplete, which is really great because that means that some of my function has returned, but it also means that I'm not completely able bodied or what some people would consider normal. So I have to use a wheelchair, and that's why I play wheelchair tennis now. But my mom was a huge proponent of how I found sports, because she was always really into having my brother and I do out of school activities, like if it was art class or dance class or soccer. And I remember when I was in the hospital, she was like, I'm going to talk to all these different rehab therapists. Like, you're going to find sports. And I remember just being like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I was a really angry kid at that point in my life because, my independence was robbed from me. This is so unfair. Why me? All those thoughts. And I just didn't want to hear it. And I remember she kept looking up different things, and eventually she found wheelchair rugby camps, she found basketball camps, and then she found tennis camps, and she signed me up for all of them. And she kept saying, you were an active kid before, you're going to be an active kid again. And I remember screaming in the car. I didn't want to go to any of them because I had never met anyone with a disability that wasn't someone's grandparent. And so for me, I was like, I'm not going to play sports with people in wheelchairs. What does that even look like? It's going to be stupid. It's not going to be competitive. It's going to be a waste of time. In my head, I was like, I don't belong with those people. And it's a horrible way to think, but I had no exposure to disability before. So I was afraid. I didn't want to be part of it. I just had no want at all. And I'm really lucky that I have the mom that I do, because she was like, I don't care. And she drove me anyway. And I remember loving all the sports I tried, but tennis, for whatever reason, clicked the most for me. I went to the tennis camp. I think I was 12 or 13 at that time, picked up a racket. I saw so many other kids that were just like me. and met all sorts of different coaches. I think there were Paralympians there as well that were there volunteering as coaches, and I was just amazed. And that's how I started tennis. And I played all through middle school, high school. I eventually went to college on a tennis scholarship. I went to the University of Arizona. Um, and then I didn't turn, I guess you could say pro. I didn't start really traveling on the tour until around 2015. And after that, I went to my first Paralympic Games in Rio in 2016, and then cut to now. And I went to the Tokyo Games. I'm the number one ranked American female, and I'm also ranked. I'm not sure if I'm 7 at the moment or 8, but I'm either 7 or 8 in the world in singles. So still plugging away at tennis, but that's me.
Thank you so much for setting the stage. I think that helps a lot. You've answered so many of my questions already, but
I'm
I
sorry.
have
Yeah, I just start and I
no.
just go.
That's perfect. It's perfect. I have so many follow-ups, but I think I want to go back to the first time that you played tennis. Did you know, like
Yeah.
in that moment, that that was your thing and that was going to be what you continued doing, or did it take some time or some convincing?
Oh, it took time and convincing. I think, I was always an active kid, like I said before. So it just felt fun that I was like, oh my gosh, this is something fun that I can do. This will be great. And I think that it took time for me to realize, like, wow, I can actually play tournaments. I can travel. I can meet lots of people that I really love having in my life through this one sport. So that was something that took time for me to realize. I never had ideations of me becoming a Paralympian or a professional sports person when I was little. It just sort of snowballed over the years, and I had these slow realizations that this was something that I could really do. But when I first started it, no, I just thought it was going to be my after school thing of choice.
I love that. I love it. So I guess after all of these awesome accomplishments, Paralympics, tournaments, championships, everything that you've gone through, what have you learned about yourself from playing the sport?
Gosh, that's a good question. And it's not one I get asked often because we do interviews a lot, and a lot of times they're the same questions, but that's never been asked. That's a really good one.
Wow, I'm honored.
Um, what have I learned about myself? I think, tennis teaches you a lot of things, especially because it's a singular sport. And so, kind of backtracking after my injury or sickness or illness, whatever you want to call it, I had lost my sense of self. I lost my independence. I lost a lot of things. And tennis or sport in general gave that back to me. I found not a reason for living. It's not like tennis was my life, but it brought me happiness again. It showed me what my body was capable of doing. It showed me how to be independent just in a new way. And I learned that from doing it, but also from seeing other people that were already doing it. And that was such a good teacher. So I think that tennis over time has taught me to be resilient. It's taught me how to be self reliant, because especially being a singular sport, when you go out there alone, like, you have to work on things on your own. You have to put the time in. If I'm having a bad day on court, it's me. I don't get to pass the ball to someone else like I got to do when I played soccer before. So I think it's given me a lot more self-confidence. I'm able to troubleshoot and problem solve, because that's something that has to happen all the time in tennis, because again, you're out there by yourself. So it's given me a lot of qualities that I think I might have learned in other avenues, but it's forced me to learn through tennis.
Absolutely. That's a really great answer for never having the question before. You killed it. That's perfect. I want to ask you kind of about the differences in singles and doubles. How does a tennis
Yeah.
player adjust? I don't know what to call it, maybe your mindset or like the way that your brain thinks while you're doing these two
Yeah.
separate things, because I watch them as if they're the same, but I know from a
Yeah.
player's perspective, they're definitely not. So how does the mindset kind of switch between the two?
Um, for one, I just think that doubles is more fun. You have a lot more shot opportunity just because the court is, I don't know, 4 or 5 feet wider, because you have, the tram lines or the alleys are finally in play, whereas in singles, they're not. So that opens up more strategies that you can do, pulling a player off the court. And then you also get to work with another person, which I find really fun. I'm not sure if that's because I grew up playing a team sport. So it's almost like going back to what I learned how to do from the get go. I love playing doubles because I know that someone needs me or they're counting on me. And I think that makes me a little bit more competitive and a little bit more focused on what I'm doing. So I think, yeah, my mindset is a little bit more like there's a little more pressure on me when I'm playing singles in terms of like, it's time to go to work. Let's go now. And it's not to say that I don't have that same level of intensity in doubles, but I think I have a little bit more fun in doubles. And that's because I get to go out there with my friends, like, because the people that I compete with and against on tour are people that I've gotten to know very well. And so it's fun to team up with people. It's fun to win together. It's not always fun to lose together, but at least you have someone out there with you. And so, yeah, they're very different, but at the same time, they are very similar. Tennis is tennis, but in one of them, you get to strategize and work with someone, and one of them, you're just out there by yourself.
I couldn't imagine. I haven't played tennis since I was probably 6 or 7 years old, so it's been a while. But
Yeah.
a huge applause for those that are still doing it, because that was not my sport growing up. But okay, I want to go back to some of the accomplishments and all the different places you've played in your career that you were listing in your wonderful intro. But I want some, I guess, story time maybe of some highlights I would love to hear about your Paralympic Games that you've been to. But any other kinds of highlights from your career so far that you want to share with us?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, I feel fortunate that I've been able to play in a bunch of the slam tournaments. So I've gotten to play at Wimbledon. I've gotten to play at the US Open, which as an American tennis player is like the pinnacle of tennis, which has been amazing.
Sure.
I was also the first American wheelchair tennis player to win a match on Arthur Ashe Stadium, which is the largest tennis stadium in the world. A little fun fact for everybody. So that was really cool. I've gotten to play at Roland Garros. I'm the first American wheelchair tennis player to ever play there, which is something I'm really excited about. But let's see. I got to compete at the Pan Ams in 2019 in Lima and was a gold medalist in doubles and a bronze medalist in singles. But I think in terms of stories, like my favorite story I think I have is actually from the Rio Paralympic Games, and it has nothing to do with tennis actually, but it's my favorite sporting moment. And I have to preface it by saying that tennis players travel an insane amount throughout the year. Like I'm not sure if it's 30 plus weeks, but it's around there. Like it's a lot of time. And because of all that travel, I don't see my family very much, and also they don't get to see me play very much because they're either working or it's just crazy expensive to travel to say like Sweden on the drop of a hat to watch me play tennis. So I finally got to have them there at the Rio Paralympic Games in 2016. And I remember my team was already there. So I didn't see them come in. I didn't greet them at the airport or anything. You know, I was already there waiting. And they messaged me the night of opening ceremony saying that, oh, we're getting to our seats. We're so excited to see you in there. And again, it was my first games, opening ceremonies. I was so excited. I knew it was going to be a packed stadium. And so you wait for the Parade of Nations, and USA's last, right? So we've been waiting for hours. But finally we get to the door and I hear the whole crowd chanting like USA, USA. And it was this big thing. And so I'm getting goosebumps and I'm so excited. And I remember them saying like, when you see USA flags, like, you know, wave at them, you're going to be on TV. And so we go in and I see the flags and I'm waving. And we eventually parade around the stadium to the part where Team USA is going to sit to watch the show. And I'm about to sit down and I see one flag that keeps going nuts. And I've already waved at it, you know, but it keeps going crazy. And so I wave at it again. And for whatever reason, I felt the need to really look closer. And it turns out that it was my family. And it almost gets me like choked up when I say it now. And like I saw my brother fist pumping and my mom was like crying, you know, and she had this flag and she was just going nuts. And my sister-in-law was there and my cousins. And that was so cool for me because to be in a stadium that big and to see them was like amazing for one, because normally you can't see anyone in a big crowd like that. But also I think that just showed me that that was when I had made it, because for Paralympic sport, that is the pinnacle of what we can reach. In tennis, it's a little different because we do have the four majors, but for any Paralympic athlete, that is it, right? So to have them there and for me to see them there like meant so much to me. So that's probably my favorite story in terms of like my athletic career.
That's a crazy story. I don't know what I was expecting when you started the story, but it wasn't that. It's such a crazy moment. Like so many people
Yeah.
in that stadium, and for that to just be your line of vision is, what are the odds, you know?
And then they were seated right behind Team USA. Like the odds of it all happening were so slim. And yeah, it means so much to me that they were there and that I got to share that moment with them.
For sure. That's awesome. This is why we ask for story time. It's stories like that. That's what I love.
That's a great idea.
I love it. Awesome. Okay, I have a series of a few questions that we kind of use as the end portion of the show. But
Okay.
one question that was submitted by one of our listeners is, do you have a kind of motto or a quote or something that you live by or that pushes you?
Ooh, I have a lot. You know, when I was younger, I think it was the cliche one of, never take no for an answer. I'm a very stubborn person. My mom actually used to joke that I'm like a football player. If I really want something, I go like first down, second down, third down, fourth down until I get what I want. Or at least like, I try really hard. I'm not spoiled and I always get what I want, unfortunately. but but that was kind of my mental disposition when I was younger, and it still is a little bit today. But I think now, I heard this quote years ago. I forget actually where I heard it, but it was that you should always chase your butterflies. And at first, when I heard that, I was like, what the heck does that mean? But it was explained to me that basically, whenever you are about to attempt something big in your life or something really exciting is about to happen to you, you get those butterflies in your stomach. And that's a feeling that you should chase. Because if you're feeling those butterflies, that means that something big is about to happen or something big in your life is going to change. And if I didn't chase the butterflies in my life, I would never have been able to tell you the stories that I just told you. I would have never moved overseas to get a master's degree, which I did a few years ago. I lived in London for 3 years. I would have never done that. I would have never moved to Orlando, which is where I live now, just to train tennis full time. I wouldn't have done a lot of things. And so I think that that's pretty much how I try to live my life. I wouldn't say I'm fearless and that if something makes me nervous, I just do it. But if something means enough to you, you'll get those butterflies in your tummy. And that's something I try to chase as much as I can.
Absolutely. I've never heard that before. I love it, but I've never heard that
I
quote.
don't even know where I heard it. I forget where. It's something that, I mean, I mentioned it enough. I should know where I heard it, but I haven't. I haven't remembered.
Let's backtrack. We can, I don't know, find somebody notable on the internet that's said it. Maybe you thought of it yourself.
Yeah,
I don't know. This could be a
maybe I
Dana
did.
quote.
I don't know. Who knows?
Awesome. Okay, cool. Last three questions for you here. First, we'll start with advice to younger adaptive para athletes. So, what would you say to someone who maybe hasn't tried wheelchair tennis yet, or wants to, or doesn't know what sport is theirs, but wants to get into adaptive athletics? What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. I think my advice would just be to try everything. I'm thinking back to where my head was at when I first was introduced to adaptive sports, and it was all just like overwhelming. And you're kind of like, one, there are adaptive sports, that's crazy. And then you're like, two, how many of them are there? Like there's so many, and it can be really overwhelming. And you're not really sure, like maybe you were good at a certain sport before your injury, or maybe you've never played sports before. So my advice is to find multi-sport camps because they exist. That was one of the first things that I got to do. It was in California. I know that currently there's some in Los Angeles. I'm sure they have them all over the country. But look for sports camps like that and just try things out. Even if you think it's not for you, like how I did not think tennis was for me, if I didn't give it a try, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So I think don't discount anything until you try it, as scary or crazy as it might seem, because you'll surprise yourself.
For sure. I love the advice questions. Moving on to our next one. What, or you can take this as the shout out question, so give a shout out to whoever you'd like. But
Okay.
who would you say has inspired you or motivated you to get to where you are today?
So many people. I think, yeah, this question's daunting because you're like, oh, I don't want to leave people out. But I think first and foremost, it's obviously my mom. I know that sounds cliche, but I wouldn't again be talking to you right now if she didn't make me go to those camps, or she didn't give me tough love. I think it's really easy after a child gets sick or injured to coddle them and baby them. And my mom obviously took care of me and made me feel loved, but she also gave me tough love. And I remember her saying, like, yeah, your legs don't work the way they used to, but everything from your waist up does. Why would I treat you any different? And it's the best thing that she could have ever done, because I didn't learn to rely on other people to adapt to my new way of life. So she's a big part of why I am the person that I am today. So first and foremost, it's her. I think that obviously the USA national coaches, like Dan James was a huge one. I'm not sure if Shelby mentioned that on her episode, but he used to be the head coach or manager for Team USA when I first started. And I remember meeting him at that first camp I went to, and it was like he was like a god, you know. I was like, oh my gosh, he's like the big man on campus, you know, for tennis. This is so cool. And he was so instrumental in getting me inspired to play tennis. He was the one that taught me that there was an actual professional tour, that I could travel the world. Um, then there's Jason Harnett, who's another coach, who's also someone that I work with every single day now. There's so many, like all the Team USA coaches have been really, really instrumental in my career. And then my first coach I ever had back in San Diego, his name's Steve Halverson. I'd never had a coach before. And he taught me pretty much all the fundamentals that I have. So between coaches, between my mom, between my friends and family, like I could name 1,000 names and you would be like snoring by the end of it. But I'd probably have to say that the head award goes to my mom. And then everyone else that's been part of my journey is obviously worth mentioning, but we don't have the time.
That's a really, really good problem to have, right? Your circle and the circle around Dana is so great.
Too big.
Yes. Amazing. Awesome. Okay, last question for you. I end all of my shows with one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self.
Gosh, younger me needed a lot of advice. I think one of the biggest things that I wish I knew when I was younger is that I shouldn't be so afraid to try new things, and I shouldn't be so afraid to be different. I think that you know, contracting an illness or a disability or disease, whatever you want to call it, when I was 10 years old, that was so hard. Because for anybody that's 10, able-bodied or not, you just want to fit in and you want to be like everyone else. And so for me, I was like, well, I'm not fitting in with anyone. Like I have a wheelchair, I stick out like a sore thumb. And that was so hard for me. And I focused so long on optics and aesthetics and what I looked like. You know, it didn't matter if I had everyone's pair of jeans. I was in a wheelchair and I hated that. And you know, looking back, my friends didn't care, you know, it really wasn't about that. Like, yes, there are times where I am ostracized or I am seen as different because I have a disability. I would be lying if I said that that wasn't the case. But I think I emphasized too much on what I looked like as opposed to just being proud of who I am as a person. And that's something that obviously I'm not perfect at now, but I think I'm a lot more confident now and I lead with who I am as opposed to what I look like now. And that's something that I wish younger me realized a little bit sooner.
For sure. I think younger Dana would appreciate that advice.
Would she take it? Probably not, but
who knows? No, that's not the question. It's just about what you would do. Amazing. Well, Dana, thank you so much for sharing your story, experiences, and reflections. Lots of reflections, I feel like, in this episode, which is great. But yeah, thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank you for having me. It was really nice to meet you.
Dana, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story, and giving a huge shout out to Dromos Agency for helping us put together today's episode and the following 3 episodes. Stay tuned for another episode of Adventures with Aggie coming to you next Wednesday.